Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of White Wonder. I'm Jack and today you join me in the stunning area of St Helens, one of the most naturally diverse places on the entire island and a haven for rare wildlife. Back in the day though, things here would have looked very different, as in the Victorian era St Helens was a thriving industrial quay and a gateway to the mainland for the railways.
Now logistically, building and operating a railway cut off from the mainland doesn't come without its geographical issues. For one, the transport of material and machinery to the island in the first place in order to build such a line. And then, when it was completed, you needed a train. As we all know, despite various attempts and ongoing disputes, the Isle of Wight has never had a fixed link. So the only means of transporting such cargo was by vessel. This practice is still observed today, as we saw recently with the arrival of the Isle of Wight Steam Railway's brand new diesel shunter. Though the practicality of the practice was very different back then. No large convenient vehicle carrying ferries in the Victorian era. Instead, your railway's goods and stock were waded across the choppy Solent waters on nothing more than a glorified raft. Certainly a seasickly thought. But even if your cargo made it across in one piece, you still need somewhere to land it.
The quay here was completed in 1882 and it replaced a more primitive structure located further inland at Brading Harbour. Of course, that one existed before the waters were receded to this point. And upon completion of this quay, the railway realised that it was substantial enough not just for the import of a large amount of goods, but even a large amount of locomotive.
That railway was the aptly named Isle of Wight Railway, formerly known as the Isle of Wight Easton section and initially opened in 1864. They operated their line between Ryde and Ventnor with an array of small but powerful Beyer Peacock tank engines, transporting holidaymakers to and from the island's popular resorts. As time went on and the latter part of the 19th century neared, their original fleet of locomotives was struggling with service demands. So swiftly, another engine was ordered for the line. But how would they get it to the island? Well, luckily a body called the Brading Harbour Improvement Company had just finished their brand new quay here at St Helens. And the branch line that the body were building to Bembridge just so happened to connect to the Isle of Wight Railway's station at Brading. A deal was struck, and it was agreed that St Helens wouldn't just become the Isle of Wight Railway's main goods port, but also a landing stage for its locomotives on order.
A huge success then for the railway, and for the foreseeable this was the manner in which locomotives were transferred to and from the island. And for the most part things went off without a hitch. Nothing really went wrong, except for when it did.
We come then to our locomotive, and she was a bit of a stunner. Ordered in 1882 and named Bonchurch, she was basically an upgraded version of the previous Beyer Peacock engines running on the Isle of Wight Railway. Accounts suggest that the loco was completed at Beyer Peacock's works in Manchester in April 1883, and actually ran all the way down to Southampton under its own steam. Eager to cross the Solent to St Helens in good time, she was loaded onto a barge apparently called Nancy, and chained into place. However, the tugboat booked to guide the vessel for the crossing was under repair, and so a less powerful tug was dispatched. This condition was met with some concern, as Bonchurch wasn't exactly a light load, and on top of that a storm was just rolling in. But even so, the order was given, and the underpowered tug hauled the engine out onto the rough Solent Strait.
Despite the vessel's lack of power, it did actually make it across the choppy waters of the Solent and was approaching the estuary here at St. Helens. The crew breathed a sigh of relief as the waters began to tranquil. But then out there by St. Helens Fort, it all went wrong.
So relieved the crew had been that they had failed to notice the incoming wash from a passing steamboat. The wash hit the barge side on and sent it into a tilt. Suddenly the chains gave way and the locomotive began to move. Within minutes the engine had become waterlogged, dragging the barge down with it. And soon they both disappeared beneath the waves. Amazingly, no one was actually injured. But the brand new locomotive now lay on its side, buried in the tidal sands on the seabed. Not exactly the best of outcomes. The salvage crew got to work straight away, but the rescue was initially postponed due to the ongoing stormy weather. Eventually though, 3 days after the engine had sank, 2 floating cranes raised a rather bruised and sandy Bonchurch from the depths.
Figureheads of the Isle of Wight Railway lined the bank, anticipating their locomotive's rather undignified arrival. And when the sodden engine finally made it to shore, they got to work to see how much they could salvage. Incredibly, despite the engine taking the plunge, it wasn't a write-off.
Far from it. In fact, the railway were amazed and rather relieved to find that the damage was mostly cosmetic. All Bonchurch needed was a good wash and an awful lot of sand extraction. The loco was sent to Ryde Works for a good old clean, and by June the 1st, incredibly, it was put into service. The engine that had spent 3 days submerged in the sea was now, merely a month later, busy hauling happy holidaymakers along the Isle of Wight's most prosperous railway.
Bonchurch actually lasted in service for a surprising amount of time, falling into the hands of the Southern upon grouping in 1923. But of course, this was the era of standardisation, and the Southern were keen to, well, standardise. And so very soon, all of the original Beyer Peacocks of the Isle of Wight Railway met their fate, including Bonchurch in 1928. But still, 40 plus years is not bad for a locomotive which once swam with the fishes.
However, that isn't the end of the story, because Bonchurch still exists, or at least will exist, kind of.
Welcome then to my spare room, and me being me, it is full of dead batteries, instructions for things I don't own anymore, and of course a model railway. Now those of you who have joined the White Wanderer Members Club, you will know that this model layout won't be around for much longer, because soon I will be embarking on a task to build another one based on an Isle of Wight theme. And part of that task will involve building some models as well, specifically Bonchurch. Now when it comes to models of original Isle of Wight Beyer Peacock locomotives, you haven't really got much choice. There is one kit available, and you can buy that kit pre-made for a little over an arm and a leg. I though like my arms and legs, but I also like Bonchurch. So what I'm going to do is cheat. This is an Airfix 14XX, which I bought off of eBay for £15. Very cheap indeed, and the reason is because it doesn't work. But that doesn't matter anyway, because I am going to take it apart and do some cut and shut plastic surgery. And hopefully by the end of it, I will have my very own Bonchurch to run on my new layout. If you would like to see me inevitably fail at that task, then you can always join the Members Club for £1.99 a month, where this model railway project series will be uploaded. When you join, you also get an array of other bonus videos and other perks as well, like the chance to take part in polls in order to have your say on what videos and subjects you would like to see me cover in the future. If you would like to join, then I'll include a link in the description and comments below. Anyway, I hope that you've enjoyed this video and the story itself, and I will see you again very soon. I'm going to play some trains.